There you go.
Hello. Oh, hello. All right, hard yarners. Well, today we are, bit of a short throat there. Today we're joined by Cav Temperley from, better known from Eskimo Joe, but not doing his solo stuff at the moment. We had a good old chat.
Yeah. What do we speak about, Cav? What was your memory of the chat that we just had?
For some reason, just the line Teflon poo just keeps going.
Yeah, so we did talk about Teflon poos and doing magic mushrooms with Ben Lee, being number one ticket holder for Freo Dockers.
Temporarily.
How they started from Perth as a band and developed into a solo career. And if you listen to the end, what song will they hear, Cav?
You're going to hear a song called The Fence, which is a song that I wrote with John Butler.
Oh, yeah. So enjoy and let's get hard.
Let's get hard.
Welcome to Hard Yarns Podcast.
I am fucking fat.
Anything Chris White says, please disregard it.
5D is actually a state of being. It's a unity consciousness.
That was Hard Yarns with me, Frankie Rose. So I'm going to throw it over to your co-host,
Daniel Jelby.
And Cameron Brand.
I would do this and then I'd gong.
Free in attendance for the millions listening at home. Let's get hard.
Cavian, cool. Because for all I know, it could be pronounced Michael these days.
I think it's an Indian name, so it's taken from the Kavi or Kavian. So I don't know. You'd have to ask someone who's actually Indian. But if you're from Perth, Western Australia, it's Cavian.
Yeah, Cavian.
Perfect. You're we're just getting straight into it. You're So are you not even in Perth at the moment? Are you over east, or where are you?
No, I'm just back, and we just got back because we've got one final show this weekend for our Eskimo Joe album tour that we've been doing. Cool. So we've been doing playing 2 albums back to back, and we've got one final show at the Fremantle Arts Centre. But I'm back in my little studio in Fremantle, which is where I wrote and recorded all of the tracks from the solo record that I'm putting out next week.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. That's pretty very exciting, and we'll definitely get to that because that's obviously the reason you're on today. But we usually talk about the journey and how you get to where you are.
Yeah, we're all about that hard yarns journey, hard yards with a bit of a laugh. So, we've started with Eskimo Joe. My first question is, why was it called Eskimo Joe? And in 2022, do you need to rename it Inuit Joe to be PC?
Well, it's a funny story. I don't know how funny it is really, but yeah, in the midst of the whole Black Lives Matter scenario, we started to see a bit of talk pop up about the name Eskimo, and growing up in Fremantle, I thought Eskimo was quite a there was Eskimo kisses, Eskimo pies. So it was kind of everywhere. I never thought too much about it, but I had got the name from a T-shirt from a diner in the States, which is still there, still called Eskimo Joe's Diner. Yeah. And anyway, so it kind of popped up, and I actually brought it up with the guys, and I was like, if this is offensive in any way, if we probably need to change our name because we're just not those people. So we actually wrote a bunch of letters and sent them out to a whole lot of people in Canada, a whole lot of professors who work in Canada, and we said, this is our story. We're about Joe. As far as we know, people haven't found this offensive, but we need to know because we're not those people. And we asked for their feedback, and so far we've got diddly squat back. So
cool.
So just rolled with it, and so far so good.
Yeah, cool. Well, I've got a new band called Woggalicious, and so far that's all good.
If I was an Eskimo, then that would be a lot more PC, I'm sure.
Yeah. I guess the intent behind words and delivery is obviously always pretty important. And you guys didn't have any malicious intent with the name, and it's stuck now. So
yeah, look, and it's a name I came up with when I was 18 years old, and I'm not 18 anymore. And so I do think back, I was like, man, I probably could have come up having known that this would be my entire life's work based on this name. probably put a bit more thought into it. But that's the beauty of being 18. You're like, yeah, that sounds great. Let's be Eskimo Joe. All right.
Yeah.
I'll make
Yeah, well, mate, when I was 18, I was Eskimo Brothers with a few people, I think. So that's a different story.
Yeah. We actually last year we had Kevin Mitchell on from Jebediah, who I'm sure you sort of have done a few gigs with over the time. And he said he wasn't really prepared for, the lifestyle of being a full-time musician and how much it breaks you down. Is that something that you've sort of had?
Well, I saw you left school at 16 to do music full time, so you must have had an inkling.
Yeah, look, I think, maybe it's easy for him to reflect on that now. I mean, I know Kev very well, and he was those guys in Jebs were doing it before Eskimo Joe got out there on the national stage, and so they were a big inspiration that you could be a band from Perth and do it. But it's funny, it's a funny comment for Kev to make because that's all he's ever done. What he was preparing himself for. But I think he can probably reflect on that now that he's been a dad for a long time, and just the Melbourne crew got the lockdown situation pretty heavily. They were even if you lived in like slightly regional parts of Victoria, which Kev does, they were in lockdown for a long time. So he was homeschooling and doing all those things. And that was probably the moment where he was just, actually started to reflect on these things, because your brain starts to shift into like home dad. For a lot of us, it was very weird going from only, being in a band, like only knowing getting on a plane within a 2-week period at all times, to just being at home for 3 years. And I think the first year, I don't know when you talked to Kev, but the first year was actually amazing. Like just stopping this time and, and being a dad and just not having to kind of run away all the time. I think that was a very healing time. But as I got into year 2 and 3, it was a bit like, okay, we need to go and make money. We actually make money by playing music, and this is getting ridiculous. So that's where it all got a bit tricky, but it is definitely a young mug's game, getting out and being on the road, like not having a fixed address, not having to think about, feeding the cat or, parenting children. I think it's pretty hard once you get to that stage.
Yeah. So I really like the name of the first band that you were in before Eskimo Joe, Freud's Pillow.
You'd be probably one of the only people who like that.
I think it's a brilliant name, because it's what Sigmund Freud's thinking about when he goes to bed. Is that?
Oh, yeah. Well, you have a Freudian slip and you have a slip. We thought we were very clever at the time, but
I think it is clever. For 15 or 16 or 17-year-olds?
Yeah, look, at the time, a lot of the music that was being made was very kind of, technical, and it was one of those terrible moments in history where funk and metal came together. So we were in this band, myself and Joel, and we were kind of sounded like Tool or Faith No More or somewhere in between those things, and there was lots of slap bass and stuff in there, and then I think You Am I were probably the band that came along that heralded the change for our headspace. They came along and started playing simpler songs with simpler chords, and just, they weren't trying to be American or Australian. They were just making good music. So that really changed us. And around about that time, I mean, I wasn't really that interested in playing the music that we played in Freud's Pillow. But so I started writing a bunch of songs on the side, and that became the beginning of Eskimo Joe.
Yeah, nice. Freud's Pillow. I guess the 2022 will be like Andrew Tate's condom or something. It would, or like Jordan Peterson's mattress, or
right.
Andrew, a different thinker now. But yeah, that's pretty cool. I remember listening to you guys in high school. Now I was what they call, I don't even know if it's PC, a wigger. I was a white rapper. I would dress in FUBU. I was a homie. My mates were at the train stations, and then the other half of our school at Wanneroo was surfies. So it was the surfies versus the homies. We had like Yanship surfies, then like Wanneroo sort of homies. And I really loved rap and Tupac, but Eskimo Joe was one of my guilty pleasures, because I played guitar, and I didn't really tell too many people I was a fan, but I really liked Sarah and From the Sea. I learnt those sort of little riffs. And I want to ask the lyrics. Sarah, Won't you tell me your name? Haven't you already got her name?
Well, you know, funnily enough, that and why don't you understand the point of fingers are the two most commonly pub. So let me give you a little education. You'll probably still get to the end of this and be like, I still don't understand.
Yeah.
Basically, imagine, you know, you're going down to the pub, you're going to the Newport Hotel in Fremantle, and there's a girl there, and her name's Sarah, and you might be like into Sarah. She knows your name, well, you know her name, but you've never been introduced, and you're waiting for that moment where she might come up and talk to you and introduce herself. And so that's why you're like, Sarah, won't you tell me your name?
Love that. These days, it's like you already know from Facebook and Instagram, and you don't want to look like a creep by going, hey, I've seen you on Instagram, Sarah, already.
Yeah, so you were a stalker.
You're a secret stalker.
Yeah, you know, and then none of that good old-fashioned stalking of just following.
Well, just out of high school, me and Delby were in a half a band in high school together. And just out of high school, poor Delby got pushed aside, and then me and the two other guys, we actually started playing a fair bit of music, Swan Basement, The Rock, Rosemount, these sorts of places that I'm sure you've frequented. Is that sort of how you got started, like just open mic nights, just band, playing music that's not a cover? It's hard to get involved.
Yeah, I mean, I was always really bad at playing covers, so that was never an option for me. But yeah, in our first band, myself and Joel, when we were doing Freud's Pillow, we played a lot of those gigs. We seemed to kind of, it was a era where there was like a lot of metal around, so we'd always get put on these big metal lineups. And then eventually, you know, when we started Eskimo Joe, we had entered the campus band competition, which was a big deal at the time. Like, you know, because the university, what do they call it?
UWA, was it?
Sorry, yeah, we were UW. We entered for UWA, but the you know, you basically had to pay a fee to belong to the club, whatever the university club was, and that money
guild.
The guild, yeah. So you had to be a guild member. And all that money would get put into bands playing at the pub. And, you know, we did those gigs for years, which were great. But to get out of Perth, to get a plane ticket out of Perth was a really big deal in the mid-90s or whatever. So we had done the campus band competition with Freud's Pillow and came second. And Jebediah had won it the year before. So that was a big success story. Yeah. So we had this one song, which was Sweater. And we thought, you know what, it's a bit of a novelty song. You know, what if we write 3 more songs like this? We could win the whole campus band competition. So we did it, and lo and behold, we won. So that was like our 3rd or 4th gig by the time we won. I think our 4th gig was Livid, because that was the prize. You got to play Livid in Brisbane.
So you guys had your own algorithm before TikTok.
Right. Yeah, we invented that shit. By the time we got back to Perth and started playing gigs, we were getting put on all these great lineups straight away because we had, you know, a good resume. You know, we were the campus band competition winners, and you get a real kind of like, you know, you're the heroes for that year. But then we had to earn our keep, and part of it was, you know, we had also won some recording time as part of the campus band competition, and we recorded the Sweater EP, and we put it out, and we were just so lucky because the DJ, the nighttime DJ, who was Calamity Jane at the time, a lady called Jane Gazzo, she started playing Sweater, and it started getting requested, and then we started getting asked to do these big national support tours, and that was unheard of at the time. So we just hit the road and started touring, and that was about 25 years ago.
Yeah, were you fresh out of high school? Was that like 17, 18, 19-ish?
Yeah, I was like 18, just 19, I think, when we started.
Especially at that time, getting the funding to record your EP. Back then, like I remember we were trying to do it ourselves, and we had to do it in a church who was just helping us out, you know, like it was too expensive. Now you can go down the local music shop, get the right equipment. It costs, you know, maybe $1,000. You got a recording studio.
I think that's a really interesting point. Like, it's actually never been easier to record at home, but in saying that, it's never been harder to get the funds from making music to make more. You know, like, you know, we live in this time. I mean, I love listening to podcasts, and I love, you know, I have Spotify. It's a great service, but like artists make no money out of these things.
Yeah.
Gone are the days when you had to get your dad to drive you to the record shop to buy Led Zeppelin 4 just so you could hear Stairway to Heaven. Like that just doesn't exist anymore. And as a consequence, music and how we make money out of music is a really, really tricky shifting sand moment in time. We haven't quite worked it out yet. But luckily we have these things like, like everyone's getting to learn these really great music recording programs like Pro Tools and Logic and Cubase, to name a few. And you can buy these interfaces, so you can do a pretty good job. But it still comes down to, like, if you want to press play on a record and it sound as good as your favorite albums that you hear and have grown up with, there is still a massive skill set to that. And you can kind of fluke it, you can put some drum machines down, you can put a vocal down, but to have a sustained album and career based around good sounding recordings, it's still a complex and expensive exercise. I mean, the solo album I just did, I pretty much did 90% of it myself. Still really expensive to do. And I'm just a lifer. I'll keep doing it whether anyone buys my records or not.
Yeah,
but
sounds similar to El Hornet we have on from Pendulum. He's like, loves just doing it on his own. He started Twitch. Have you looked into doing anything on your own on Twitch? And
I only laugh because my wife's just in the next room there, and we were doing a podcast series just before the whole world shut down called Hat Jam. We went to Kevin Mitchell's place, went to Josh Pike's, a bunch of different people, and we played this game called Hat Jam where we would like pull a name out of a hat and write a song in real time on this podcast.
Oh, that's great.
That's awesome.
And it was cool. We wrote all these really great songs. And anyway, the pandemic kicked in, we couldn't travel anymore. So just as everything was starting to kind of lighten up, me and my wife, Beth, who is known as Studio Cat on the podcast,
Nice.
we decided we would go, well, like, fuck it. It's time to get into twitching. We're going to be Twitch artists. And and the internet in my studio is not great. So we did one, if you go into Twitch, you can probably find it. There's one tragic broadcast of me and Studio Cat trying to do this thing. And like, we keep looking at each other and it's glitching out. We're like, what's going on here? We had these like, grand schemes of like, yeah, we're going to be like Twitch millionaires. Like people are going to be throwing money at us. It's going to be amazing. But yeah, we did one and we haven't been back. So
Twitchy and Scratchy cancelled.
But it's amazing, like I guess technology and how much has been used over this pandemic. Like you're in Fremantle, we're in Osborne Park, and we're still doing a Zoom.
The distance between us,
yeah. So obviously, like, I know you're busy, but that sort of thing has opened up a market for a lot of people to do it during the pandemic.
Yeah, it has, and it's also opened up a market for people to upskill. Like a lot of. The best question to ask people is, what did you learn during the pandemic? And everyone had to do one thing generally around technology where they had to learn to do something new and then find out, lo and behold, it actually wasn't that hard and they could do it, and that's pretty magical, I think.
Yeah. I had to learn how to teach my kids. My kid and my nephews. Delby's former teacher just handed in his resignation, actually.
Yeah, I actually make up songs on the spot. I'm a freestyle rapper and I got paid for it. Which I'm resonating with your making songs up. We do that. I'll send you a link after. You can have a look at our Mark McGowan song that we freestyled.
I did. Yeah. When Corey White was playing the guitar in studio, we made up the words.
We just did did Oktoberfest, and that was the biggest rush of all time. But I wanted to ask you before we move on into your solo stuff. We always ask anybody that's made it. So it sounds like your big break was getting that funding to go and support all the acts. Would you say that was probably your big break?
I guess that was a break. I mean, it's always that thing where you get a little win and then you think you're at the top of the mountain and then you look out and there's a giant mountain range in front of you and you got to climb another mountain and on it goes. And that doesn't seem to ever stop. But you have little wins along the way. But, if you are, again, a tragic lifer, you just keep doing it. And just at that moment where you think you're not getting anywhere, suddenly you have a little win again and you break through to another place.
Nice. That's a great analogy. I felt like that. I went to Edinburgh Fringe to do some stand-up and I was not at the bottom of the mountain. I reckon I started in the Mariana Trench. So, complete ego death. But have you ever heard, we always do this one, have you ever heard any fake news or fake stories about yourself or the band throughout the ages that's ever been thrown around where you've been like, oh, I didn't know that we were getting paid $1 million to support this, or I didn't know that this person did that?
There's a kind of like a wiki website, but I don't know, I can't even remember what it's called. I wish I could bring it up. But it's, you know, they have profiles on all different artists, and one of the things that, you know, you type in is it tells you your net worth. Apparently I'm worth like $23 million or something. But the other thing is, like, it's clearly like English as a second language website, because it's just mixed up about maybe 3 or 4 different people into my profile. So and my kids just laugh so much because it said that I was 5'3", and for some reason they just thought that was hilarious that I was nearly 6 foot. And then and that my children were actually named something like Hugo and Alistair, and then and I've got like a sneaker brand called Yeezy, and it's just like take all these little things from all these places. But one of my favorite like moments in the whole kind of weird, you know, world famous in Perth thing is that you look on, if you type in your name, and then you'll have like things like spotted at you know, I don't know, at Spotlight,
Trig.
And
Yellow.
Along, like, you know, and like, so there's people hiding in the bushes taking pictures of us and then in a line and being like spotted. So that actually exists, and I find that the most bizarre part of the whole experience.
Yeah, right.
I don't know why you haven't addressed this one, but I'm sure this is fake news. You can't be the #1 ticket holder for Fremantle
in
not
2010.
Fremantle.
Are you still #1 ticket holder, or is that 2010?
Well, in my heart, but no, we were the #1 ticket holders for a couple of years over, like, I think from 2010 to 2013, which is a great honor, of course. And
the year
they were fairly successful.
They played in a grand final.
Yeah,
what,
they
made
it to the grand final, I think, just as on our final year as ticket holder. And
did you get a gig at halftime?
And they gave the #1 ticket to Ben Roberts-Smith, which I don't think they talk about.
That one's, apparently they cut the bottom leg off that #1, and who knows what happened next. The person before you was Nick O'Hearn, so I mean, it was in good hands. Did you get any gigs from it, like when they made the grand final? Did they invite you to do?
Oh yes,
Yep.
we got invited to play the wrap-up dinner after they lost, and that was pretty much like playing your grandma's funeral. You know, and we like anyway. They invite all the players on like one by one, and I think Ballantyne had a shocker, like, you know, just missed some really key goals. So he was the first one, and he walks on stage, and he just has to stand there while everyone walks up. Anyway, like, most of the players were pretty relieved to be on the other side of it because it's a huge amount of pressure. Yeah. But like, as soon as they had brought everyone on stage, and then they were like, "Now it's Eskimo Joe." We were like, "You guys ready to laugh?" You know, those terrible moments.
Enjoy your black fingernails and red wine.
Yeah, you've got you guys actually, was it last year when it was in Perth, played the grand final?
Yeah, that was huge. We actually just got they give all the artists who play the grand final a Sharon football with the name of your band on it. I just received that, and I'm like, you know, I'm such a hack. Like, I don't follow sports at all, you know? And everyone asks me about football, like, because I was the #1 ticket holder and had such an affiliation with the club. Like, oh, so what do you think about this stat and this stat to do with this year? I'm just like, and I have to like segue to something else every time. But this is the first time I've been like, I am going to actually blow that Sharon up. I'm going to get one of those, you know, Sharon glass boxes. I'm going to put football in it. It's going to go straight to the pool room. It's going to be great.
Yeah, and that's historic because of Melbourne's breakthrough and being in Perth. So that's unreal.
Historic for being the best grand final entertainment they've had as well.
Yes, yeah, of course.
Yeah, certainly.
And something you said earlier, which I really like, is that how you said you wanted to move away from sounding American and more Australian. I love that, because there's nothing I hate more than rappers that are Aussie that rap with an American accent. I really liked, I think it's Kiss Chasey, where they sing like how they talk. So yeah, I appreciate that. You dying over there, Bretch?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it's a fine line, that one, because you can, to quote the Commitments, sing in the international language as well, where it just sounds musical. I mean, hip hop's very parochial. It feels ridiculous to rap in an American accent if you're from Perth, Western Australia. But you look at, there's one of my friends he's got a act now called Il Combo. They're super cool. His name's Alex. Anyway, they used to have this really cool hip hop act called Good Buddha, and the way that he rapped, and he's also a great singer, was awesome. Like, he didn't sound American, he didn't sound Australian, he just sounded like just a great voice, and I think there's room for that as well.
Yeah, that's cool. So, growing up, like you started your career in a band, so now we can move on to all your cool stuff that you're doing individually. Did you always want to be a solo singer? Did you always want to do it in a band? Did it fall that way because you needed other guys to make music with? Because you're the vocals on the bass, slapping the bass,
slapping the bass, man.
Or like, what was your?
I actually, I used to be a really technical bass player when I first started, and I was like the slap king of my high school, and I would really daggy, but I would
in a good way.
Oh yeah, exactly. I would go to high school parties and I would just sit in the corner with my bass and an amp playing slap bass.
Nice.
Yeah, bit daggy. Not a great way to pick up girls, but I started to get into singing and songwriting, which is a way better way to pick up girls. No, I think for me, I was always really into storytelling. Always, that was my kind of number one thing. When I was really young, I used to tell these ridiculous lies. Like, they were not even like believable at all, but there would be these long-winded stories that I would like claim had happened to me, and you could sit there and
so Google was the worst thing to happen to you on phones.
Totally.
People like, that's bullshit.
They indulged me for a while, but then when I was about 13, 14, I found that I could articulate what I was saying through songs so much better. Like, I could talk and talk and talk, but somehow, that combination of the sound of your voice creating an emotion and putting that into words, it just resonated with me. And I found this real place, and I started to put those storylines into that. And that was kind of what interested me the most, is the writing part of it. And then, you always have ambitions. Every time you write a song, you're imagining playing the chorus in front of thousands of people. I still get that. It's such a social thing as well. So as I kind of started to play music, you find friends who make music, and then I was really lucky to end up in this. I got the gig just being the singer in Freud's Pillow, but I wasn't really into the music, as I said before. So I started to write my little emotive acoustic songs on the side, and that initially became Eskimo Joe. But then somewhere, again, like, we kind of became this novelty act, with the song Sweater, because it worked and it was a good pop song. But then we were sitting down writing the first record, writing a song about teddy bears or something, and Joel came in, to his credit, and was just like, this is shit. And because I just started to write these songs for me, I was like, oh well, this isn't the music I want to play. And Joel was like, these songs that you're writing need to be Eskimo Joe songs. We need to get rid of this novelty crap and be a real band. And so I was like, okay, cool. And so that was Girl, our first album. So from then on, it was pretty much, that's what it was about. I would go into a room, I would write a song to the best of my abilities on an acoustic guitar, then I'd present it to the band, and then we'd workshop it and turn it into what would become an Eskimo Joe song.
You were like Australia's Got Talent, and they were the three judges. Like, original version.
Rubbish. And that's pretty much how it went up until around about the album Inshallah. And that was where everybody else started to kind of come in with more ideas. And I would never be someone to say, no, I'm the songwriter. That's not how it works. Yeah. But from those last couple of Eskies records onwards, it was more about us really sitting in a room together and building up the idea from scratch. Yeah. Because everyone had really needed to feel like they were being validated artistically as well. And I wouldn't say no to that. But then somewhere in that process, it started to happen again. I started to go, well, I'm just going to write these songs for me over here. Yeah. And then that eventually grew into what became my first solo album. And then I started writing the album I'm just about to put out, and I thought maybe it could have been an Eskimo Joe record. I just didn't know. I was just doing what I always do, which is just write a song on the acoustic guitar to the best of my abilities.
Yep.
But it turned out that it was another solo record, and that's totally okay with me. And I feel like I'm now finally at that place where, you know, the songs that I write are going to come out as solo songs, because everyone in Eskies is kind of off doing different things. We might do one song together every once in a while, but if I want to make full length, you know, albums with a vision and a storyline, then it's going to come down to me in a room, probably this one that you see behind us, just doing that. And so it's okay. Like, it feels like I've gone on this journey, and this is where I've ended up.
Is there any bitterness or resentment from the other lads? Like, oh, you don't care about us, you're doing your own thing, or is it all love?
It's all love now. I think the only time that those guys got a little bit funny is I did a side project with Kev Mitchell and Josh Pike and another friend called Steve Park, and it was like a kind of Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young thing, and where we're doing harmonies, and it was all acoustic guitars, and we wrote, recorded the whole thing in my back shed, and then toured it, and the whole project was like 8 months long. But that was the first time I did anything outside of the band dynamics, and that was actually the moment where it shifted to where everyone was like, well, I want to write songs at Eskimo Joe too. So
yeah. Well, Josh Pike was on repeat on my CD player when I used to work for a while, so that I guess there's some similarities with the genres and stuff, but it's another creative outlet for you. But I do remember Kev actually saying most decisions happen like they all do with Jebediah. He makes a decision and they agree.
Yeah. Like those guys have been doing it since they were really young, so I'm sure they have a dynamic that just works for them.
It's like a marriage. You got a little side hoe on the side, and getting jealous.
Pre-marriage, yeah.
So, how did you find that dynamic as well with all your bandmates? Because it is, I find if I do my solo comedy, for example, trying to relate to what you'd be going. So if I do my solo show, I have to put in time with my next big thing, which is Who's Rhyme, which is with Mac Shane, and I've put loads into that. Sometimes if I get asked to book a gig, it comes with like, do I do this as a solo gig, or do I bring my team with me, which would be like Mac Shane, or do Confessional, or bring some lads in? How do you find that process in your head, and how do you decide what's for you and what's for the band, sort of thing?
It's a really good question. I mean, it shifts and changes all the time depending on what cycle we're in. Like, for instance, it just happened that the solo album that I'm doing at the moment ended up coinciding with us doing this big Black Fingernails Red Wine, A Song as a City tour, and that was completely by the fact that COVID had happened, and we were meant to do the tour about 2 years ago, but it kept getting pushed back, and then it just happened to all happen at the same time. So I had to have a conversation with everyone, over Zoom, and go, hey, how do we make this work for everyone? And we worked out, that I could put with a little gap, I could put my record out there, and then I could do a little regional tour there, and then we could wait to this point and I would do a solo tour there. So it becomes a bit more of a horses for courses thing, like often I'll go out and I'll do things like there'll be some super cool Beatles tribute, album tour. And that's something, of course, I'm going to do as a solo guy because, I'm the singer and that's how it works.
Yeah.
But, if there's like a random one-off orchestra gig, often they'll want an Eskimo Joe because it's a greatest hits set, and that'll work for that. But then if I'm doing some, I don't know, like my own kind of they want me as a singer, then I'm going to come in as a solo guy because they don't need the rest of the band, and that's just how it is.
Yeah, because I always feel kind of bad, like when I do something for myself, if I've got other people involved, but it's also like the own pressures I'm putting on myself, going, oh, this is, and most of the time I say to the boys, like, I've got this, and they're like, nah, sick, go do it. So it's more like coming from a positive place, but sort of feeling.
No, I secretly resent him.
So what was your new sort of influences for the album that you brought out, and how was your first solo experience? Because that'd be pretty scary for your fans. Do they like you, or do they like your band, or do they like the sound? What was the first one like, and what's changed?
Well, this is my second solo record I'm putting out at the moment, and the first one was really this kind of like, who am I outside of being the guy in Eskimo Joe? You know, as an artist, like I always know what it feels like to be in a room by myself playing a guitar, but you know, to turn that into a complete picture of an album, there's a lot of work that goes into that. You know, you've got to write all the parts from the piano to the drums, and then what do you want the drums to sound like? How does that, you know, reflect the sound of the record? There's like all of these thoughts that you go into. You know, you have to analyze all this stuff to make, you know, a well thought out record. So a lot of the first album was that. You know, I was just doing what I normally do, writing the best songs I could write, but then I needed to kind of analyze what I want. I knew that once I set the scene, that was going to be who I was as a solo artist. Yeah. So I did that, and I was really proud of that album. And then this time around, by necessity, like I started writing it at the beginning of the pandemic. I literally, like, we arrived back from Australia. We did one of the last episodes for our podcast where I laugh because it was a vaguely traumatic experience with Ben Lee. Where he made me take magic mushrooms live while doing the podcast, while I was engineering, hosting, and writing a song in Laurel Canyon.
All right, we're not going to skip over this. I'm going to come back to that.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. Anyway, so we came back, and literally a day later, the whole entire world shut down, and we were in lockdown. And at the same time, I came down with a mystery virus, and we didn't know what it was. There was no way to test whether it was COVID or not. And so I had to isolate in my bedroom, and my lovely wife slept in the library on the floor. But there was a piano in the bedroom. And so as I started to feel a bit better, I started to kind of play piano and begin to kind of document what was going on for me. And so began this journey of, like, you know, writing this record in isolation about this kind of, you know, I guess it's like a post-apocalyptic true story.
Yeah.
But then I had started recording it for real, and I couldn't fly to Melbourne and, you know, record with this person over here, or go into that studio and record drums, because we weren't even allowed more than 2 people in a room. So I just started doing it all myself here in this studio, and I just kept going the whole time. And it was probably a longer process than I would normally go through. But to answer your question, there was less time for self-analysis. There was less time to go, what kind of record am I making? You know, what do I want it to be, this or that? I just had to go, you know, I would press record for where you can see me, and then I'd run through to the other room and play piano. And then I'd listen back and be like, yep, that sounds good. Brilliant. Let's move on from there. And if it sounded bad, I'd re-record it again, but I didn't go, does that need to be like a felty piano sound, or it sound like 70s or 80s? I was just like, fuck it, that sounds good, brilliant, moving on. Nice. And what came out of it was a much more organic sounding album, much more similar to the work that I did on the album A Song as a City. It's kind of got a bit more of a gentler feel to it. But I was also lucky enough to have a bunch of people, once the world started to open up a little bit, I had some really cool collaborators like John Butler and Katie Steele come in and help do some songwriting with us, which was wicked.
So have you got, like, instead of from the sea, from the borders?
From the sea to the borders. No, we can workshop that later.
My question when you were saying, like, I wanted the drums to sound this way, did you do all the drums and every part of the instrument? Or...
No, the drums was one of the only things I didn't do.
Wow, so everything else.
But what I would do is I'd made, like, so this is getting a bit nerdy, I'm sorry, but on the last record, I was really into because, you know, in Eskimo Joe, Joel has always played the drums. It's a certain kind of sound when he hits the drums. Sounds wicked. It's very Eskimo Joe. But I love the sound of, like, early 70s, you know, like super dead kind of drum sounds. And so I wanted to get that sound. And I spent a lot of time with this lovely chap called Pip Norman, basically trying to get that exact sound. And then at the end of that, we got samples of all the, like, once I'd recorded it all, I got him to do a snare sample, a kick sample, and then I loaded that up on a drum machine. And so as I was writing the record, I was kind of programming in the drums with these really cool 70s sounds that I put together. And so by the time I'd kind of written a lot and recorded a lot, I did the drums a little bit later, and I went into a studio that we used to own in O'Connor, just out of Fremantle. We had a studio that we built with Eskimo Joe that we sold in the last couple of years, and now it's run by a chap called Elliot Smith, who also plays drums. So finally, when we were allowed to be in a room with a couple of people, I went in with him and said, gave him all the programmed drums, and we just recorded them and kind of redid them in that slightly 70s way again.
That's pretty cool. When you do your music, so my co-host, Mac Shane, he sees music. He's got that kind of, what is it, kinesiology? I can't remember what the word is.
Bite out of something goes, that sounds wonderful.
Yeah. Like he sees his words coming, sort of thing. Do you, what's your musical style? Are you like just classically trained? Are you just whatever feels right? Like, how do you put a song together?
Definitely not classically trained. In fact, I was chatting to Josh Park yesterday in a similar kind of podcast thing, and we were both talking about imposter syndrome, about how we're like always feel like we're the shittest musician in the room, yet we have these successful careers. But when I come up with an initial like kind of little kernel of an idea, usually the melody and the lyrics kind of arrive at the same time. And these days I'll just use my iPhone and I'll just sing it in, sometimes in a really inappropriate place, like as I'm driving the kids to school.
Allegedly.
And so I build up those ideas, and then when I get a moment, I'll sit down at the piano and start to flesh them out a little bit. And some songs just come out like a Teflon poo. They just come out fully formed, no pain whatsoever. And then some ideas you have to labor over for very long periods of time and until you get it right. And that's okay. It doesn't make either idea better or worse. It's just, that's what goes into making a record. I mean, some people talk about this idea of like, you can't wait for lightning to strike. You've just got to be in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
I'm more of a kind of like fishing analogy guy, like you just got to keep chucking the hook in the water and keep, fishing for fish, and eventually you'll pull a whopper out.
That's right. That's what Tinder's for as well.
I guess going back to something you mentioned before,
Teflon poo.
Teflon poo.
I think that needs to be the name of your next single.
Teflon poo. So, and I don't know how much you want to go into this, the magic mushrooms and stuff, obviously.
This is amazing.
If used for like the right reasons, there can be some pretty cool benefits and like some groundbreaking moments. Was it just a bit of a fun and it's the wrong timing, or did it help?
Well, let's get this straight. I mean, I'm a musician, so I've definitely used recreational drugs in I hadn't done anything like, acid or mushrooms for a very, very long time. And Ben's a really interesting character because he likes to think of himself as the provocateur, his point of, it's a really interesting thing. I mean, I find this fascinating about people in general, but his point of creativity, what do you call it? The pivot point, is he likes this idea of tension where you provoke someone and then they react, and then that is where your jump off point for creativity.
Sounds like our friend Wolfie.
Well, and for anyone who has ever taken magic mushrooms before, it's a horrible idea to start to be all like, throwing out points of tension at someone. So yeah, we were doing this podcast, and I knew that he was going to try and fuck with me in some way because it's Benley, and he pulled out the magic mushrooms, and I just was like, I'd done that stuff before. I know how it works, but I had to kind of concentrate. And luckily, my wife, Studio Cat, didn't do any of it, so she was there, kind of moderating, making sure we didn't disappear anywhere. But yeah, I made it through. I don't think it was a pleasant experience. And then afterwards I left. I said goodbye to Ben in his Laurel Canyon house, and I just went back to our accommodation and curled into a fetal position. Just kind of, but finally came back down to earth. So it was
funny. The world ended the next day. So I'm did it really, or was it just the mushrooms?
We literally got on a plane and went home and was like, oh yes, and the world has ended. Look, anytime you do those kinds of psychedelics, I think they need to be taken not I don't know if seriously is the word, but they have to be respected. They're going to take you on some kind of psychic journey, and you've just got to be prepared to go on that journey. So I came out the other side. I had done it enough in the past that I knew what I was in store for, but it was a tricky scenario, like hosting a podcast, editing Pro Tools, and writing a song from scratch with like this guy who just wanted to fight me the whole time.
That's fucking crazy.
So you
can
were
listen to it. It's out there, by the way. It's Hat Jam. Funnily enough, the worst song out of the whole series, but it's there. So it's all to listen.
So there wasn't like any spike in creativity. It was just like, fuck, I need to get through this without the tension being too much.
It was hanging on by your fingernails material. Yep.
Is that where black fingernails, red one?
That was a very different experience, and it involved me, but we can talk about that another time.
Just the mentioning the drugs gave me a flashback to actually Kev's story about Marilyn Manson. I think he gave someone a bottle of piss or something like that.
Yeah, pissed in a bottle and slashed the pool.
Yeah.
Slashed the pool that everyone was swimming in backstage at Big Day Out.
Have you had any starstruck experiences or any crazy stories from your time over the years? Because that's always fun after hearing Ben Lee spiked you with shrooms.
Look, there's probably plenty of stories that I can't really tell out of respect for the musicians. Seem to involve Lily Allen for some reason. But you know, you do see that stuff going on backstage all the time. I think people are a lot more like aware that everyone has phones these days. So gone are the days of like reckless abandon backstage at a Big Day Out concert. You know, there's just too many cameras and too many people filming these days. So those kind of moments of craziness kind of happen in, you know, the wee hours of the morning. But the Big Day Out was such an amazing experience and filled with so many starstruck moments. I mean, I'm terrible when I meet people who are really famous, even people who are just like my peers who I think are really talented. I just freeze up because I'm always in awe of, you know, great musicians.
Yeah.
But we did some really, really cool, interesting concerts over the years. And one of my favorite moments, the story that I can tell, was that we did this thing called Live Aid. No, Live Aid. Sorry, it was an aid of some description. Anyway, it was at the Sydney Cricket Ground. It was about sound relief. It was called Sound Relief.
I do remember.
Yeah. And so there's heaps of bands playing. There was Olivia Newton-John, you know, singing with Barry Gibb. You know, there was Coldplay got up with John Farnham and did You're the Voice. It was like, you know, all the bands were playing. I
do remember that. Yeah, I do remember this gig specifically. Yeah,
it was incredible. And we just released the song Foreign Land, so we kind of got out and played that, and that was an amazing experience. But one of my favorite moments was I needed to do a wee just before I was about to go on stage, and I walked out, and our backstage room just happened to be right next door to Barry Gibb's backstage room, and I was about to walk into the toilets, and there was this big like bouncer who was like, and all I could hear was Barry Gibb in the toilets just going. Doing his walk. I was like, it was just so good.
Oh, fuck.
You can tell by the way he walks, he needs to piss.
I don't remember.
Maybe he was doing a warm up. Maybe that's how he wheezes. It's like
always getting off with someone in the toilet.
Something specific from that concert that I do remember was Chris Martin jumping into the crowd during Fix You and just like could not get out. But the crowd was it was an immense moment.
Well, they were holding him down.
No, he was trying to run through it. Everyone just wanted a piece of Chris. But do you remember that moment? Were you there at that time or?
Yeah, I was there. I don't remember him getting stuck in there for too long. It clearly didn't traumatize him because he was cruising around backstage afterwards, being the most charming person on earth. I remember passing Taylor Swift in the hallways before she was, the biggest star in the world. And I remember going, why is this random country American girl here? This is she got up and she looked really like she had this kind of just like a t-shirt and like brown pants on, and she was singing. And then the moment where the crowd got behind her, she got into this one moment, this song, and then just like ripped it off. And the whole outfit was just unvelcroed. And underneath she had this like glittery dress on. And everyone was just like,
wow.
Yes! And I was like, you might go far, this kid,
That would have been that Romeo and Juliet or whatever.
Oh, mate, I would have avoided her in case she wrote a song about you.
Funnily enough, like one of my big pandemic albums was Taylor Swift's Folklore. I'd never really gotten into Taylor Swift. I always thought she was just a little bit too shiny and mainstream. Like I'm such an indie kid. But I found myself just like doing the dishes in the morning, going back and like listening to it on repeat over and over again. And then like I had to admit I was obsessed with the album, and then I bought like the limited edition vinyl, and then I made the whole family sit down and watch the long sessions, which is where they got together and finally performed the record together. But I was very surprised what a good record that was. So, Taylor.
Yeah.
Nice. You're feeling 22, baby.
I guess with like, going into the solo stuff, having had a 25-year sort of relationship with the band already, and then I know you did your solo stuff a few years ago as well, but it must feel like a fresh start, and almost like, a different avenue going forward.
Yeah, it feels like a bit more dangerous, and like I've still got a lot more to prove, and especially like stepping into the space of like doing like what Kev from Tame Impala does, which is, you're writing everything, you're producing everything. I mean, I didn't mix the record, but that's what Kev does as well, because he's just a super brain. But going into that space feels exciting and dangerous in itself. It feels like, I hate to say it, but you're always kind of looking for that recognition as well, for people to be like, you did that and that was amazing. That's one of the, you can psychoanalyze that as much as you like, but that's one of the reasons why we do what we do, is because we're kind of trying to get people's attention all the time.
I think Pillow could figure that one out.
But going into that space of becoming the producer, the writer, and the musician in my own projects, that feels kind of exciting and like a challenge in itself. And you always go into these things. I was talking again yesterday to Josh Pike about this idea of, you're always kind of terrified that you're going to get ripped apart by people. That they'll tear shreds off you, and that's kind of exciting in itself. It's a huge risk every time you go and make music and jump into it. You are not only emotionally putting yourself out there, but you're literally putting yourself up there to be taken down massively. And you need a thick enough skin, but you have to be quite brave. And going into the solo thing deeper, it feels like, I'm having to take a deep breath and be as brave as I can be.
Yeah, because music is so subjective. And you're going to have people that hate it no matter what, because it's just not their genre of music. Yeah. I guess arming yourself with resilience is a big part of that, but it's good to hear that you're brave with that. But
yeah, because it's something that, like with me with freestyle rap compared to something that I've written, it's like the biggest get out of jail free card when you're freestyling, because you're like, I just made it up. But if you're presenting something where people go, you've spent time on this is shit, like you prepared this, you think it's good and it's trash, that's terrifying.
Man, I reckon motherfucker must be the get out of jail free. It's just like, motherfucker. It's like,
so how do you take that? So obviously we've got the new song. Is it Last of the Wine?
Last of the Wine is the last kind of, it was like almost like a soft single that I put out. It wasn't ever meant to be like one of the big songs off the record, but the focus track once the album comes out next week. I don't know when this podcast goes live.
Today,
yeah.
It's happening right now. So October 19th, which is Wednesday next week, the record comes out, and the feature track is a song called Defense, which is a song that I wrote with John Butler. And it's we initially kind of sat down to write it for his record, because we had actually written a song for his last record, Home, and I got together with him and his house down south, and we're just hanging out and talking about where our heads were at with the whole pandemic thing, and a lot of it was to do with decision making. Having especially with the vax and anti-vax movement, and to do with people having to deal with just before the pandemic we had fires and then floods, and is that there's epic environmental decisions we're having to make, and actual decisions. And so we were having that conversation, and then that spilled into the song we were writing, which is a song called The Fence, and it's just basically talking about the idea that there's no room to sit on the fence anymore. It's the type of song that if I had have sat down to write by myself, I would have never written that song. But it's fucking John Butler, man. He is the king of the activists, and I have so much respect for him. He's an amazing musician, as well as he puts his money where his mouth is when it comes to his activism. So, I wrote a full-fledged John Butler song with him, which was just hilarious and amazing.
That's awesome.
Must be incredible watching him, because he's very talented. You see him on guitar. He's ridiculous. He seems to me like the type of musician that it doesn't matter how talented you are, you're going to look at him and go, fuck, I could never do that.
Yeah, he shreds, man. And he's got his own style of playing as well, which is really interesting, which is he's built up over a period of time. Just from, because his shows are like 3 hours plus, and in Eskimo Joe, we've got 6 albums, and, we've got like a couple of hits off all of those records. And we're like, we have to play for over an hour. What do we play? Whereas, this is a complete side story, but me and John were attending a friend's wedding. And it was down in, I don't know if you've been to Borenup Forest, down south, and it's this beautiful, piece of like Karri Forest, right there, just near Margaret River. Anyway, the wedding was like literally out in the middle of this forest, and we were there, and then suddenly this person rocks up and goes, "It's an emergency. The wedding singer has been lost, and she's not going to make it in time to sing these guys down the aisle. Are there any musicians in the house?" Like, fuck, that's us, isn't it?
Did you get up?
They definitely set you up. They never even booked a fucking wedding singer.
Did you get up and go, emergency?
Well, we looked at each other and we were like, well, what do we know? And we had like a 2-second kind of like, okay, let's work out what we know how to sing. And we worked out we could both sing Stand By Me, and that was kind of, appropriate enough for a wedding march. So we picked up a guitar that was there, and we sung Stand By Me, and our friend Lucy walked down the aisle. And then a month or so later, he was like, "Oh, you should get up on stage and sing that song with us live." And I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." He was like, when do you want to come up? And I was like, "Oh, I don't know, like halfway through the show, I guess." He's like, "You realize that's 2.5 hours into the show?" I was like, half an hour into the show, he's like, "Yeah, that's like song 2." I was like, "Cool, sounds good."
Sick.
Awesome.
So are you just keeping your name for your solo career? You weren't tempted to go Temperley Trap or Tiny Temperley?
Temper, I don't know. Temper Trap. Yeah, I think that's been taken. Yeah, look, I don't know. I think at this point in time, I've been in bands and I've done side projects. I felt like, you know what, it's time just to be plain old Cav. So that's what I am now.
First Cav off the rank. Have you got like details? Is it dropping on Spotify? Is it being like physical? Buy it on iTunes? What are the details? Because we're
if you want to be a super good human, definitely buy it on iTunes. I'll get more money for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can stream it on Spotify or wherever you stream your music. That all hits everywhere on Wednesday next week.
Yeah.
But if you want to be a legend, come along to the show in February, and I'll have final by that stage. So when I do the album tour, which is like, kind of mid-February, I guess, we'll do a limited edition vinyl, which we'll put out, through your JB Hi-Fi's and everywhere like that. But also you'll be able to buy it at the shows. And I listen to vinyl all the time. So just be rest assured, it will sound amazing.
Yeah, cool.
Awesome. We'll download it legally, and we'll put a song at the end. Is there a song you want us to play at the end to play out the end of the?
Well, I guess we just did a whole lot of talk of the John Butler song, so The Fence. So if you've got access to that, then give that one a spin.
Perfect. Awesome. That's
so
it.
We'll keep an eye on the date that you're in Perth, I guess. Get your people to talk to our people, which is just me and Branchy. But yeah, we'll plug it on our socials for you as well.
Thank you, you're legends, and thank you for doing what you're doing. Without you guys, you know, we wouldn't be able to do what we do as well.
Thanks, heaps.
Awesome, really appreciate it.
I'm so sick of all the flag wavers, self-appointed gurus and internet savers. But I know the world is not flat. I don't need your opinion to figure out that many things that I don't understand, and I can't afford to keep my head in the sand no more. And every day the surface gets hot. I don't wanna be another frog in the pie. It's a fine line, but it's moving all the time. Oh, I try to keep up, I try to keep up. I peek out on the world to stop making any sense, and there ain't no room to sit on the fence no more. No room, no room, no room to sit on the fence. No room, no room, no room to sit on the fence. Just before the world shut down, and I thought I had both my feet on the ground, witnessed it all going south, watched every word that came out of my mouth. Contact traces and ambulance chases, get no reaction from all the blank faces, and I'm complicit with blood on my hands. That sinking feeling is just